was sort of going, well, have we seen enough? We've seen so many Northern Lights. But it was incredible, and it was, I could not have imagined what it was like on the cruise. And what I love about the company is I now feel completely part of this family, and I hope I've got round to chat to every one of you. If I haven't, please come and find me afterwards. I'd love to meet you, and I hope to meet you. Oh, I didn't meet you because you were in the loo.
Too much information.
But I think I met everybody else. Okay, so I thought it would be interesting to tell you a little bit about how bronze is made, because I think, well, certainly I didn't know when I got into this, that I imagined that you'd sort of have a mould and then you pour bronze into it and it would just sort of, woo, there's your sculpture, and you make another one and another one. Well, it's very different to that. It's a very long process. And I've got a piece here that's from my personal collection, which I brought specially for you because it shows a piece that is shows all the different. There are 22 different phases of making a bronze, and this piece here, the actual sculpture is this little figure inside. And what I'm going to just explain to you as best I can with the help of a little book, because it's such a difficult thing to explain. But I make a piece of sculpture in clay or in wax, and then that is what the gallery says, yes, we like it or we don't like it. That's my artwork. And then you introduce the foundry, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. There are about 19 or 20 different processes this has to go through before it becomes into this beautiful piece of bronze. So the first thing you have to do is to make a silicon mould. So I make my little clay of this figure, and then you pour, it looks like blancmange, it's pink it's pink silicon stuff, and you pour it over the top, and that goes off hard. I'm going to show you here. Oh, I didn't tell you that inside, when you start making a figure, you have something inside called an armature. And particularly with the conductors upstairs, you'll see I plan the figure, what the body language is going to be. I make a piece of a steel and I weld it together into the position. So, you know, whatever position it's going to be, there'll be steel inside, which I've welded together. So that's the first decision you make, is what is the body language? So these ones that are very active, you know, I will have made a steel interior into here, and then I've worked the clay over it. That's inside. Okay, so when the pink blancmange goes on, here we go. It's absolutely beautiful to photograph as you pour it on. You pour it over, and then you encase that in a hard casing which you bolt together. Now inside the pink blancmange, here we go. This has got red wax painted into it. Now, has anybody heard the term lost wax process?
Yes.
In French, it's often known as cire perdu. What it means is you're going to paint wax to the thickness that you want the bronze, so about 2 to 3 mils, into this silicon mould. And it's painted in like this. This is my dog in a bucket. Here's a green wax painted into the pink blancmange mould, and then out of that comes this wax, the same. So the wax will look like the sculpture that you made. Okay, now what we're going to get into now is how we lose this wax. What is the lost wax process? We're going to then we invest that. Oh, sorry. Another little thing has to happen first. When you fill a mould with a liquid, you'll often get air getting caught in it. So if I had a beautiful little figure, you might get an air bubble and no toe appear, because there'd be an air bubble. So in order to stop that, you do something called, I'm going to put it this way because this is the way that we're going to pour the bronze. You attach a cup to the figure, which is going to be where we're going to pour the bronze in. And all these little things, these little pipes of wax are called sprues, and they are attached to anything where an air bubble might go, so where you might lose the bronze when you pour the liquid bronze. So it's called a sprue system. Okay, So when you've got the whole thing sprued up like a demented giraffe, like this, you then encase the whole thing in plaster. So you're going to put plaster inside the wax and outside the wax. So when the wax dribbles out in the kiln, you have a perfect space of that shape inside, because you've heated the wax that was in the perfect shape of the sculpture, and you've encased it all in plaster, and out it dribbles. So all you have left, and you've attached a cup. So you have this is all a void. It's now a little void at 2 mils of exactly your sculpture. Hang on, upside down. This is putting it's made into a great big barrel like that, all the way around the sculpture, little sculpture inside, into the kiln, and the wax drips out into the bottom of the kiln, and then you're left with a great big circle like that, with this void inside. Then you heat up the bronze in what's called a crucible, and it's something beautiful to behold. If you ever get a chance to visit a foundry, try and go and visit on a day when they're pouring wax, because they put the ingots of wax, which are like gold ingots, into this 1,000-degree crucible, and it's what they call it dances like the sun. It's just this incredibly beautiful, as it heats and liquefies, it sort of dances like the surface of a planet or something. You imagine the surface of the sun or something. It's a very beautiful thing, and it's stirred up by the foundryman, and then a bit like if you're making jam or marmalade, there's that scum on the top, and that's skimmed off the top, and it's picked up. They take the crucible out. Look how hot it is. It's bright yellow hot. I mean, it's really hot. The crucible that takes it, and this is like a huge 2 people either side, with like a huge pair of scissors. That they're far enough away not to get burnt, and they pick up the crucible, and then they carry it together, and they with a gantry usually, because it's so heavy, and it's also extremely dangerous to spin it, and they pour it into the cup bit, which I showed you on the top of the demented giraffe, into the that's inside here, and the sprue holes. You see these, you'll see that there's boiling hot stuff coming up through the sprues, and then you know that the little toes at the end is full, because it's come right up this is the sprue system. You see, it's attached all the way around, and so that also turns into bronze, obviously, because it's the wax is the sprue system. That also gets turned into bronze. So afterwards, if you want to come and have a look, it's hard to see, but this, have a look at this picture, because this shows you the kind of thing that comes out when you're making a bronze in this thing. It is not the perfect sculpture. It has to be welded back together. It's often cast in, the bottom half of the figure is often cast separately and has to be welded back together. And then comes what's called the chasing of the bronze. So all of these, you can see the investment is this white thing. This is what we put around the wax, and this is what gets knocked off. You see, here's the foundryman knocking it all off, because once it's bronze, you can't damage it. You grab a great big hammer and you smash it to bits. And when I was taking this investment off this piece, I actually thought, that's really interesting. That's a beautiful thing, because you can see the thing inside. It's sort of a little bit like being on a dig, you know, an archaeological dig. You're like finding a dinosaur in there, or finding a treasure in there. And the sprue system hasn't even been cut off here, because I actually stopped, because sometimes beauty is in process. And I decided that I wasn't going to take that any further, because I just thought it's really interesting, and I call this piece Life Interrupted. Because sometimes you never get to the end of the journey, but actually the journey itself is quite beautiful. And I think this is quite beautiful because it shows the cup is still on it. But if you were taking this piece to its finish, you would now have to take this, knock with a chisel, knock all this white, it's called investment, the plaster, off, and then you go in with a Dremel or whatever, and you cut off all these bits that are outside the figure. And because I wanted to use this to demonstrate the long process it takes to make a bronze, I polished up a bit of the figure so you can see where it was going. So if you come and have a look at this, you see all the different processes and the tiny hand and how all the investment's in there. Obviously the cup comes off. And then, so then when the figure's freed from this and you've spent a long time working with hand files and getting all the sprues off and getting rid of any kind of seam lines that you might see or bobbles from where the sprues were, and you've got it to a beautiful smooth finish, or in the case of my conductors upstairs, that's a very visceral type of sculpting, and you hopefully don't do too much metal work because it comes out right. Then why, if this is the colour of bronze, how do you think we get this brown? This is, sometimes people, it's called patination. Sometimes people do it in verdigris. It's quite fashionable to do it in verdigris. This is kind of a Rodin brown. Rodin used this sort of colour a lot. He also used a Rodin black. Basically, the next thing, again, it's a whole lifetime of learning to be a good patinator. But you take certain chemicals, it's like you've got a recipe book for different colours. And you use things like liver of sulfate and I'm just trying to think of what they all are. I can't even remember, my mind's gone blank. But all these different chemicals, and you find a recipe book for different patinations and the colours. And a lot of artists create their own patination from their own recipes. So you have a flamethrower in one hand, you've got your sculpture there, and you've got your chemicals there. And it's actually quite, when I first started doing it, I was terrified of it, because not only am I dyslexic, but I was thinking like trying to do this. But you've got to heat up, from the bottom of the bronze, you heat up the metal, and then you get a paintbrush and you have to learn, and it's a musical thing, it's really interesting, you've got to have a good ear, because it's got to be at exactly the right temperature that makes this noise. And if you can get it, and you learn, and it's practice, to get that noise, it turns the metal, with that chemical, it turns the metal the colour you want it. And then you go all around the bronze, trying to get this lovely even colour. And so I'm just trying to think, it's really annoying me, I can't remember the chemicals we've used on this. But anyway, it's in a recipe, you make up your own recipes. And also I'm a great experimenter, so I shall probably spend a bit of time this year experimenting with different types of colours. But these are largely Rodin brown. So you patinate that colour, and then I personally do what I normally do, and all the smooth ones have had my personal touch, and I do, when it comes back to me, I love it back to life, which is for me to be handing it over to the gallery, and I put 5 layers of Renaissance wax on, because if you look at these ones, rather than the new ones, which are much a different kind of look and a different kind of, they're much more visceral and immediate and done as a performance really, but these slower and quieter pieces, you'll see the depth in the bronze because they've had 5 layers of Renaissance wax, which has built a beautiful depth to it. And so it's a long process. What I'm trying to say is it's a hugely long process. It's been done from time immemorial. The world is changing. 3D printing is completely changing the way we work. But on the whole, these have been traditionally made, and they are very time consuming and have been my passion for 10 years, and I'm just thrilled that you were all here to enjoy them. And also, I just want to say at the end of that, because I've probably gone on for far too long, I'm very excited to have discovered Viking, so and that we can go, and I've called it, the new thing is the adult gap year, which is the greatly anticipated pleasure of going on their ships. And I hope to meet some of you in the future, down the rivers, on the high seas, and aren't we lucky to be the ones who discovered Viking and nobody else? Yes.